First, Nikola Jokic has one of the best performances of his entire career in a game where the Nuggets desperately needed it, taking a 3-2 lead in a pivotal Game 5 after going down 0-2 at home. And then the Knicks and Pacers exchanged 30-point blowouts in Games 4 and 5, giving New York a 3-2 advantage in the series, but it still feels like it could be anyone's series. Hello everybody, welcome to Ask Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference in how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Do that or go check us out on Spotify, follow us there, like the podcast, go give it a listen. If you'd prefer this be an audio experience, then that's available for you. But with that said, let's talk about Nuggets versus Timberwolves Game 5. Nikola Jokic was handed his third MVP award of his career at the start of this game, which usually comes with an added bit of pressure to the game that you're about to play. Luckily for the Nuggets, Jokic would do the same thing that he had done for the last 2 games, which is respond to that pressure and dominate. The Timberwolves probably felt pretty lucky leaving the first quarter trailing by just 2 points despite a bad Anthony Edwards first quarter, and an excellent Jokic quarter where he scored 12 points and got 4 assists on good efficiency. He was pulling out all of the tricks in the post versus Gobert this game, getting a filthy spin into a short fade that would beat the shot clock, and he got an and one attacking off of the catch in the post on Naz Reid. KCP also made his presence felt for the first time in the playoffs this year, going 3 for 4, hitting a 3-pointer to match the one Anthony Edwards made on him just seconds before. We also saw a lot of Justin Holiday in this one, as we have in recent games. I said the dude was one of the worst rotation players in the playoffs right now, and then he has shot 64% from 3 since then. So fuck me. But unfortunately, can't say he was all that good in this one. He did have this really nice drive and kick off of the catch to Michael Porter Jr. for a corner 3 over Rudy Gobert, but he also found himself on an island against Cat in the post, which caused Jamal Murray to help one pass away, which meant an easy 3-point look for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, hitting the first of his 4 3-pointers in this game. Nickeil would hit another 3 from the same spot despite a better contest, and Cat off of the inbound would hit a post hook over Peyton Watson. As a whole, Denver wants Karl Anthony Towns posting up because it's statistically not a very efficient possession for the Timberwolves, so when he gets these fairly easy post-up opportunities, it's important that he actually converts on them. Overall, this was kind of a terrible quarter for Minnesota, but they are only down 2 going into the second in spite of this. From here, you can theoretically rally the troops and win this game. However, unfortunately, Anthony Edwards seemed to have little interest in being rallied, because he would go 0 for 4 in the second quarter, making him overall 1 for 8 in the half with 3 turnovers as well. As a result, they had to work as a team to get just 18 points in this quarter. Gobert abused Justin Holiday in the post, which got Michael Malone very, very upset. Men can be so emotional. For the Nuggets, this was the quarter for the bruisers. Aaron Gordon and Christian Braun would both make 3 shots in this quarter. Aaron Gordon, a dunk in transition after stealing it from Ant. A dunk on Gobert, who had his back turned focusing on Jokic, which allowed him to sneak in the pass at the perfect time. And Brown would hit an and one on Jaden McDaniels, as well as getting a transition dunk off of a well-timed Jokic dime. Jokic only shot the ball 3 times in this quarter, but he made all 3 of them in spite of the ridiculousness of at least 2 out of 3 of them. Hitting a step-back 3 over Kyle Anderson off of a handoff, and having an absolutely bonkers post hook over Gobert after narrowly avoiding stepping out of bounds. What do you even do against that? There's been a lot of discourse about Rudy Gobert after the game that Jokic just had, but shit like this is not his fault. There was nothing to be done. Denver was up 6 at the half, which again, given that this was a dominant Jokic game so far and a terrible Anthony Edwards game so far, you still feel decent about that if you're the Timberwolves. Luckily, in the second half, Anthony Edwards played quite a bit better, getting 13 points and 7 assists in 22 minutes, reacting to the defense much better, shooting efficiently. He was not quite the unstoppable force we had seen in the other 4 games, but he was much better in the second half for sure. However, the rest of the team outside of their big 3, Ant, Towns, and Gobert, shot 26% from the field in this half, hitting 7 out of their 27 shots. Meanwhile, for Denver, that supporting cast came to play all while Jokic continued to be dominant. On top of that, Jamal Murray had a much larger presence in the second half, going 5 for 6 from the field. The third quarter is where Jokic was at his most ridiculous, probably in this series as a whole, scoring 16 points on 6 for 7 shooting, hitting yet another filthy post move on Rudy Gobert. Again, what the fuck do you do with that? He would also throw a touchdown pass in the split second between grabbing the rebound and turning around to see the player, getting Jamal Murray an easy transition dunk. This dude is just special. And around the 3-minute mark of the third quarter, we would be hit with a barrage of and ones. Ant banking in a short jumper after bumping hard into KCP, knocking him on the floor. Then Jokic would drive into traffic for a layup, getting hit late by Kyle Anderson on the head, and then getting a difficult floater to go after driving into the chest of Gobert just a few possessions later. As for Minnesota's offense, well, their 3 best players were starting to have damn good performances. Cat, Gobert, and Ant would go 9 for 13, Cat hitting a sidestep 3 after losing Gordon on a pump fake, and Gobert doing his job as a roll man. Denver is intentionally guarding the pick and roll in a way that prevents Gobert from just rolling straight up to the basket, forcing him to make decisions in the short roll. In the last 2 games, this was pretty damn effective, and Gobert had some ugly moments offensively as a result, but in this one, he pretty much made the right decision every time. And here is Justin Holiday once again being a defensive liability, being at the wrong place at the wrong time, resulting in a Gobert finger roll off of a pick and roll with Towns as the ball handler. Unfortunately, despite this good performance from those 3, the role players would really drag Minnesota down, and with a dominant offensive quarter from the Nuggets, the Timberwolves were down 14 going into the fourth quarter. And that's just not the kind of lead that this Nuggets team is going to blow. Like, normally, even in the playoffs, a 14-point lead really ain't shit. That's something that you can give away. But so far in this series, whether it's because Minnesota's defense has been so dominant or because Denver's offense has been so dominant, a 14-point lead with 12 minutes to go, there's just no way the opposing team is going to either match your scoring or match your defense. As a result, the rest of this game pretty much felt like a formality from here. Add onto it that Christian Brown hit an open 3, Aaron Gordon hit a ridiculous fadeaway off glass to beat the shot clock, and Jokic hit yet another step-back 3. Denver just buried them in the fourth, again despite the best efforts of Ant, Cat, and Gobert, as well as Naz Reid, who finally woke up in this quarter, but it was too little too late as Denver would ultimately win 112-97, and in a series that previously looked like it was going to be a massive upset, the favorite is back on top. Okay, I'm not jumping right to the keynotes first. I actually just want to complain about something, so if you'll indulge me, Jacob's gonna complain about something. So, I made a video a couple of days ago about Jokic's MVP, specifically just the 2024 MVP race at large, and I was talking about what that MVP looks like in the world where Jokic actually loses to the Timberwolves. Of course, I was talking about this after the Timberwolves took a 2-0 lead in Denver's home court, which is somewhere they're notoriously unbeatable. All I said in this video was that if Jokic won the MVP and they lost that series, which I didn't say was guaranteed, but if it happened, it would result in some nasty narratives that I wasn't looking forward to. That's the main crux of my argument in the video, the main thing that I'm talking about. I did say that Luka would be a better MVP pick, and I still stand by that. That's neither here nor there. That doesn't change. That didn't change going into the series, or it won't change after the fact. The regular season MVP, how I feel about that's not going to change based on a playoff performance, but after winning an MVP, players are held to these standards. And while I thought Jokic was more than capable of rising up and making a recovery, going down 0-2 at home, losing in the way that they did, especially given that it quite literally never happened before, you know, it was a decent possibility. I think it was fair to think that the Nuggets were going to end up losing that series, so it warranted the discussion, especially because it was a discussion a lot of people had. Just because I am discussing a narrative, I am talking about what the discourse is, that's not an endorsement of that discourse. In fact, very rarely is that the case. Like, there's a question mark in the title, guys. I don't know what else you want from me. I understand a lot of people who watch these videos are watching it for the first time, aren't someone who watches these regularly. And if that's you right now, I appreciate you watching, and sorry that I'm complaining so much right now. But I'm not a Jokic hater, to say the least. The fact that I have been accused of that, of all things, just goes to show you how absolutely garbage discourse in the basketball world is, because I've been called a lover or a hater of literally every basketball player ever at this point, because you can't just have an honest discussion about what could happen without it being hate. It's just dumb. I definitely was wrong that the Timberwolves would probably win. That thing I got wrong. But other than that, the video didn't age poorly. It aged poorly in that it wasn't relevant anymore, but I didn't predict the future going one way and it went differently. That wasn't what the video was. All right, my key notes for the Denver Nuggets. First of all, Nikola Jokic. What is there even to say? This is a legacy performance for him. Now, I would say he had more pressure on him going into Game 3 than he did this Game 5, but if Minnesota won this one in Denver going into Minnesota in Game 6, probably wouldn't have been great. Now, granted, of course, we have seen through the first 4 games home court advantage not seeming to matter for either of these teams, so, you know, maybe they just are just going to keep trading. That's the way that would have gone. They really needed to win this game, given that the team that wins Game 5 after a tied up series at 2 is very often the winner of that series, because of course they only have to win 1 more game while the other team has to win 2. A lot easier to win 1 game than it is to win 2. You can afford to make that mistake, whereas the other team doesn't have the ability to make that mistake whatsoever. But yeah, Jokic just went right at their throat. Any one-on-one opportunity he saw, did not matter who was defending him, he went right for it. Against Rudy Gobert, he was 8 for 9 from the field in this one, and I'll talk more about Rudy and the discourse around him later, but this was mostly because Jokic was just hitting some impossible shots, like step back threes, ridiculous hooks from very far away. He had that one where he was like basically almost falling out of bounds, and then Gobert was just like, I just gotta make sure, I'm just trying to knock him out so that he gets the turnover. He narrowly avoids it and then throws up this ridiculous hook at this ridiculous angle that still manages to go in. Like, shots like that are why Nikola Jokic is ridiculous. Might I say, I didn't realize that moving Aaron Gordon around on the floor, having him do some ball handling, having him cut from different areas on the floor, having him just attack in general in different ways, that, as well as the empty corner pick and roll, I didn't realize how much that would break this defense that looked like literally the best one I'd ever freaking seen. Because man, it really, really, really made a difference. Having Aaron Gordon bring the ball up, they're not putting as much pressure on him because A, they don't want him to get a full head of steam running to the basket, but B, you know, they want to sag off of him. That's the defensive strategy to begin with. Pressing up on him is counterintuitive to that, even if it is a full court press. And that also prevents Jamal Murray from just getting worn down as he crosses the court because he's just being harassed constantly. So whether it's Jokic, whether it was Aaron, that helped quite a bit. It let Jamal get more into off-ball action to start, like get into a set to initiate offense, rather than him just trying to do whatever the hell he could off of the dribble against this terrifying defense. So that adjustment has made a world of difference. Not having a defender that can dig out of the corner on the pick and roll, that makes a huge difference. There's just a lot more space to operate with. Jamal Murray is getting into pull-ups. Jokic is managing to find enough space for his floater where there's not really a strong enough contest on it. Really, it's only the difference of about half a second what this adjustment has made for how much space Denver has, how much room Denver has to operate. But that's more than enough for Nikola Jokic, and not more than enough, but it's also enough for Jamal Murray to have a good game himself as well. And Jamal has regained his composure because of this adjustment completely. Obviously, the fact that Aaron is less of a liability on the defensive end is the biggest positive to come out of this change into their scheme. However, Jamal being, you know, not too flustered, not too hot-headed, not missing a bunch of bad shots or turning the ball over, getting hounded, all of that stuff. He's just not worn down. He is maintaining his composure. Now, he had 16 points on 14 shots. He didn't do anything amazing in this game. He was doing exactly as much as he needed to, and that's all you can really ask for him against a defense that's as good as this. And if you pair that with Nikola Jokic having 40 points, 10 assists, and 0 turnovers, being the second player in NBA history to ever do that in a playoff game, yeah, that's a winning formula. And it's especially a winning formula if some of your role players are contributing. Aaron Gordon had a good game in this one. He had a rough shooting third quarter, I think it was, but other than that, it was pretty much perfect from him. Again, still not really a three-point threat, but he was attacking inside, timed his cuts really well. That was a really pivotal thing very clearly early on, was that, you know, when they were doing that Gobert guarding Gordon off-ball thing. They're still doing that, and they're not going to stop doing that. The Nuggets have just found a better way to counteract it. But when that was happening, Gordon was just kind of sitting there, and then whenever they would do the backdoor cut, Gobert was good enough at timing it to where he would see the cut happening and he could both contest a Jokic shot, but also not give up an easy opportunity to Aaron Gordon. And being able to do both of those at the same time, it really alleviates and takes away from the value of Gordon. But they've timed those cuts a lot better. And Keely, because they're not having him attack from the corner, an empty corner where everyone can see him, and instead he's like cutting through action, I think it's just harder to see him coming. And that really makes a difference when you're so focused on the shit that Jokic is doing, because he's obviously cooking you at every turn. So he just has to make sure to take advantage when Gobert has his back turned, because I think the biggest dunk of the game that Gordon ended up getting was a backdoor cut into a dunk on Rudy Gobert, because Gobert had his back turned as he was focused on Jokic. So the timing of all that was great. KCP finally had a good game. He went 4 for 5 from outside. He was shooting 25% from 3 in this series and 27% for the playoffs at large before this game. Him not hitting those open shots has made a real difference because it makes it easier to bring pressure onto the ball, and it's not punishing the defense for leaving him open. He was punishing him in this one. He hit a lot of very big shots. He hit the first one and then airballed his second 3, so I was like, oh shit, this might have he might have gained his confidence and then immediately lost it. But no, he would go 3 for 3 from that point. Excellent game from him. A really good Christian Brown game with 10 points off of the bench. If his 3 starts to go in consistently, that guy might end up being their like Bruce Brown 6th man guy. I thought it might be Peyton Watson because I thought his jumper looked a little bit better and he was a little bit more versatile as a larger forward. However, Christian's a really strong finisher. Even though he's 6'5", he's around 70% at the rim for his career. It's a little bit worse in the postseason as you would expect, but like he's a strong finisher even despite being a 6'5" guard. If he can just shoot decently from 3, he's currently at 27% for the playoffs in general, but if he can just hit those open 3s and make the defense respect him, then he's really doing everything you can ask, because he's a positive perimeter defender, he's a really strong finisher, he makes good decisions with the ball. As long as that 3's going in, there's really no reason not to play him the like 28 plus minutes that he played in this one. He also, for what it's worth in this series, it's low volume, very low volume, but he's taken 6 threes in the first 5 games and he's made 4 of them. That's good. They're giving him the open shot, he's taking it, he's hitting it. The Nuggets as a whole scored 1 more bench point. 1 more bench point than the Timberwolves did. Now that's not a lot, not really significant at all to have 1 more bench point normally. But if you're the Denver Nuggets and your offense from the bench, or really anything from the bench, has been complete dog shit, getting 16 bench points while Minnesota only got 15, it makes a big difference. Naz Reid was not very good in this one until the 4th quarter, and then you had the 10 from Christian Brown. You also had Reggie Jackson going 3 for 3. I think it was like there was a reverse layup, a floater, and I don't know what the other bucket was, but they were all 2-pointers. Having all that going for them, it seems almost impossible for Minnesota to win this game, especially getting a game like this from Anthony Edwards. I do think that Minnesota is actually going to win Game 6. I don't feel like they're going to go down that sad, especially after starting as well as they did. And again, with as many things were going against them, Minnesota managed to kind of be in this one when they really had no reason to be. And that is pretty huge, I would say, especially like if you just got a normal Anthony Edwards game, this is a winnable game. If Ant was good the entire way through, if he wasn't getting flustered with his decision making early on in the first half, they might have won that game, and that was very achievable given everything else going on. You just can't afford to have Jokic go off, Ant have a bad game, and your role players get outperformed. At that point, you just have too much stacked against you. But with that said, even though I think they can win Game 6, I would be very surprised if Denver lost that Game 7 on their home floor. Obviously, they have lost 2 games on their home floor in this series, so it's possible it happens a 3rd time, but I said that lightning wouldn't strike twice, so it makes it harder to say that it won't happen 3 times after it has happened twice, but still probably just gonna stick with 2 on that one. My key notes for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, so maybe I jumped the gun a little bit about this team being the best team in the entire NBA, because frankly, I was just flabbergasted by what I saw in the first 2 games. I have not seen the Denver Nuggets as thrown off, as bothered, as scared as I saw them in the first 2 games of this series. And given that the competition that they faced in last year's playoffs was not all that remarkable, and this team just seems like it's much better than every team they faced, the general idea was, shit, they finally faced an actually very good team on top of the fact that they're a very good team, and that was enough to fluster them. But of course, they adjusted to that very well, and I'm not really sure what Minnesota can do to fight back against it. Based on how dominant they looked, especially given the fact that they also had Anthony Edwards going off on the other end, like, this looked like a team that was just going to be a ridiculous defense and an unstoppable superstar on the other end. Karl Anthony Towns, a really good second option, but the offense wavered a little bit, and the defense has definitely wavered. They have not been nearly as dominant on the defensive end of the floor. They give up 113 points, I think it was, in this game. 112. That's a lot for this team. That's a lot for them to give up, and it's a lot considering they held Denver to like 80 or 80 something in game 2. It's just been so much more space available, and it's not because they've made wrong personnel decisions. If anything, the fact that Mike Conley didn't play in this one, I mean, it did also mean that there was a lot of Monte Morris, which is an even smaller player than Mike Conley, who's a worse defender, so maybe that's overall not good. But, like, you know, there was more Nikola Alexander-Walker, there was more length in general, a little bit more Jaden McDaniels action. So, like, their defensive personnel hasn't gotten worse, and I don't really think their approach has necessarily gotten all that much worse. Denver has just managed to find a perfect counter for it, and that's enough for them to not only win these last couple of games, but look pretty freaking dominant in just about all of them. I wasn't sure that the Nuggets had a pivot to make. Obviously, they would come up with something. I thought they'd win game 3. I thought that they would have something that they could do, but shit, I didn't think that this series would just completely flip the script for the following 3 games after such a dramatic first 2 games. But that empty side pick and roll, it's just enough. It's just enough to create enough space to get that offensive engine running again, and that's all it takes for them to bury this team again if you have a bad Anthony Edwards performance. Let's talk about Rudy Gobert. He caught a lot of flack for this game, which I thought was very unjust, as it pretty much always is with Rudy Gobert, because people don't like the guy. They have decided that they just have to be completely dishonest about him when it comes to the actual basketball on the floor constantly. It's irrelevant whether or not these things are true. It's just what's the funniest way to slander him, and to go, is this your defensive player of the year after Jokic has that game? You know, if you're dumb and you view the game in the most surface level achievable, then yeah, I can see how you would walk away with that take. However, that's not the way that basketball really works anymore, and it's not even really the way that it fully worked ever, where, like, the best player in the NBA, you don't really lock that guy up. Like, in history, there's only a couple examples of teams clearly locking up the best player in the NBA, like Michael Jordan in the final 3 games of the 96 finals, LeBron in the 2011 finals. Kobe wasn't quite the best player in the NBA in 2004, but, you know, him against the Detroit Pistons, it's not something that doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen often throughout history, and it especially does not happen in an era where offense is as good as it is now. While there has been much more of a defensive presence in the playoffs, and that has been awesome, at the end of the day, great offense will beat great defense. That has always been true, and it's even more true today than it ever has been. So yeah, Rudy Gobert got cooked by Nikola Jokic, but you could have put any other defender in the NBA on that matchup, and I don't think it would have made a lick of fucking difference, because we saw in that game 1 that Rudy Gobert was quite devastating to Jokic as a help defender. Obviously, it's not the same as the ridiculous game that Jokic had in game 2, where he had like 14 points on 16 shots, and Gobert wasn't there to cause that, but in the first game, he shot very poorly against Rudy Gobert because he was bringing help defense, you know, on the weak side. He's bringing a second body to the ball where an initial body is dealing with him on the post-up. Just having him on the post-up, all he can really do is jump as close to the shot that Jokic puts up as he physically can. More often than not, he ends up doing that, but it just doesn't matter because Jokic only needs this much space for the finger roll, for the hook shot, for any kind of touch shot that he has to go through. And at that point, you just got to tip your cap if you're Rudy Gobert Gobert, he really made the right play just about any time. On the defensive end, you can count his mistakes on one hand. In fact, I can't even really think of a super prevalent Rudy Gobert defensive mistake in this one because he very rarely makes those kinds of mistakes. And he didn't in this one. It's just, again, great offense beats great defense. For what it's worth, he also did everything that he could do on offense. He's 7 for 7 from the field, 18 points. Like, I realize people don't really tend to value his offense, but truthfully, it's something that's important for them because it's the easy points of their offense. And Rudy Gobert having a high-scoring game is pretty indicative of how open the rim is as an option, whether it be for lobs, for putbacks off of offensive rebounds, dump-off passes, hook shots, or post-up moves on like a mismatch like he had with Justin Holiday, things like that. Those are the kind of shots that if you're getting that, you probably are having a healthy offensive balance, assuming that you're not relying on that stuff too much. And they didn't really have that the last two games. He had like 6 points. I don't know if it was game 4 or game 3, but he had 6 points and he shot the ball poorly. And this one, making all of his shots, making good decisions on the short roll. He found Jaden McDaniels on a backdoor cut. He took the ball right to the rim on a couple of different occasions, got to the free throw line when he had an opportunity, made them pay for just the fact that he's big as shit and they left him some open ability to run to the rim. This is all good stuff from Gobert. I really think that he did everything he could. I feel like Cat was pretty good in this game. Nothing special, not one of his best performances, but he did what he had to do as a second option. In fact, sometimes he ended up being the first option just because Anthony Edwards was so bad for many stretches of this game, especially in the first half. Ant was bad for the game at large. I have to overall say this is a bad performance because, yes, he was much better in the second half. However, 1 for 8 from the field, 3 turnovers. That's very bad. They had that deficit going into the fourth, and the scheme that Minnesota was dealing with here, they're bringing 2 to the ball on Anthony Edwards, which is something that we've discussed, is something that we kind of just discuss constantly now. I'm finding myself saying the expression bringing 2 to the ball more and more often, but that's really just what modern offense is coming down to. It's can you get away with a double team? Because if you can have a high turnover and low field goal percentage game from Ant, and in the first half, he did not respond well to being blitzed, did not make good reads, made a lot of panic turnovers, took some shots that just were not great. But he responded in the second half. He had 7 assists. I don't think if he turned it over like once from there. Much better with the ball. But again, it was too little too late. He just needed to be good the whole way through, especially if Denver's offense was going to be this good. Game 4, they narrowly lost. Not that narrowly, but narrowly by comparison to this and game 3. But that was because Anthony Edwards had like 44 points. Like, they need that kind of performance from him. Otherwise, they just don't have enough to win this series because the Nuggets offense will prevail over their defense. They still have hope at closing out the series. It's not over. They've beat Denver on their home floor before. They could do that in a game 7. They could finally capture the momentum of their own home court in game 6. But I'm probably going to chalk this one up to Denver. Definitely jumped the gun a little bit with this team, but 0-2 at home, again, in Denver is so outlandish based on the precedent that was set last year. So, whoopsie, panicked a little bit. But yeah, that's that game. Let's talk about the Knicks versus the Pacers. This isn't a breakdown. It's just kind of some rough thoughts because I wasn't able to scout this one, but let's get into it. So both of these games for the Knicks and the Pacers are kind of random. Honestly, I would say that this series as a whole has been very random, very unpredictable what happens on a game-to-game basis. Honestly, after the Knicks went up 2-0, it seemed pretty evident that the Pacers just could not hang, but then of course they won the next 2 games. Game 4 being one that they won extremely convincingly. This is of course partially due to injury. Jalen Brunson was dealing with something, and of course he's also dealing with the Aaron Nesmith matchup, which is much more difficult for him than the previous matchup of Andrew Nembhard. There's no OG in this one, and as a result they were kind of spread pretty thin. There was a lot of offense that had to go to players that you otherwise wouldn't want them to, namely Alec Burks and Deuce McBride. Now, for what it's worth, Alec Burks Burks actually did have a very good scoring game off of the bench, as he has continued to do pretty much every time that he plays for the Knicks in this postseason, because again, the injuries have called for it. He had 20 points in this one off of the bench, 8 for 10 from the free throw line. Deuce McBride was being asked to do a lot of shot creation, and I just don't think that that's really what his role is. I think he's good enough at secondary shot creation, you know, in terms of like attacking off of the catch, or if there's really just only one other good offensive player on the floor. But because there was routinely no good offensive player on the floor whenever Brunson was sitting, and because Brunson is pretty much the only actually very good offensive player available to this team at this current stage, that meant that Deuce McBride just had to shoot the ball too many times. He had 16 points, it took 17 shots, shot like below 40% from the field. And the Knicks actually won the offensive board battle in this one, which of course they lost in game 3, which was huge. Like, my whole takeaway there was like, hey, if the Pacers can beat them on the offensive glass, I don't know what else the Knicks have going for them. But they managed to, I think it was 16-10 in this one between these two on the offensive glass. Not a huge discrepancy, as big as it often has been for New York. This was just more a matter of the Pacers offense being unstoppable and the Pacers not being able to, and the Knicks not being able to get anything to go. And the Pacers were playing good defense, but it also wasn't like some clearly way better than everybody else defense. Like, it's not like they just shut them down. It's just a matter of the Knicks were not really comfortable. Brunson, all of his shots were difficult, requiring him to expound a lot of energy. As a whole, he shot 6 for 17. Dante DiVincenzo shot 3 for 13. I just think that the Aaron Nesmith matchup on Brunson has really turned the tides in this series, and if you were going to look at this game just as it is presently and not actually factoring in the potential of what we know now from Game 5, it would make a lot of sense to look at the Knicks and how they are currently playing as, yeah, it might be over for them, because it looks like they're stretched too thin. It looks like they don't have enough minutes to go around rotationally. Too many guys are playing too many minutes, and they're dealing with a bunch of injuries because of this overextension. So probably a bad likelihood of them actually winning this series from here. Obviously, those first 2 games were nice, but if you're just going to continue to get hurt, continue to be stretched thin, and if you're not going to dominate on the offensive glass in the way that you have previously, on top of the fact that Indiana is managing to get out and run because you're trying to dominate the offensive glass, it was just kind of a poor recipe, and a lot of people were like, oh, the Knicks might be screwed. We might be getting an Indiana Pacers conference finals appearance. However, Game 5 was the tale of another blowout just on the other end of the spectrum. Jalen Brunson with 44 points and 7 assists. There was nothing that anyone could do to stop the guy. Didn't matter how he was attacking. Pull-up threes, driving to the basket, posting up. Got everything he wanted to go. He took 35 shots to do it. That's kind of just the way that Brunson and the New York Knicks play. The dude guns. He takes a bunch of shots. If he misses them, his team's going to grab the offensive rebound. And in this one, maybe this was the most dominant offensive board game that they've had thus far. As a total, they had 20 of them, while Indiana only had 5. Isaiah Hartenstein had 12 offensive rebounds, I believe 7 of them coming in the first half. And as a result of this rebound discrepancy, I think there was a minor free throw discrepancy as well, which is another thing that's crazy about Game 4, is that the Knicks actually got 31 free throws to Indiana's 8, and they still lost by 32. That's because they shot 71% from the field, or from the free throw line rather, which is not good. They shot 22 of 31, missing 9 easy ones. And they shot 34% from the field, 19% from 3. The Knicks hit half as many threes as the Indiana Pacers did. So yeah, things were bad for them in Game 4. Completely flipped the script in Game 5. And on the other end for the Indiana Pacers, it was kind of a similar script being flipped thing where like Tyrese was pretty damn great in that last game. He didn't do a crazy amount. There was more of a scoring distribution thing for Indiana. I think they had 6 players score 13 or more points, 5 players score 13 or more points. Just a lot of guys contributing to the scoring load, while he had 20 himself. But in this one, he shot the ball 9 times. That's just not acceptable, especially when the offense is very stagnant. It's just not going to do enough. It doesn't put enough pressure on the defense. He only got 5 assists in this game because he's just not collapsing the defense. Like, he's taking some 3-pointers. That's chill. He's getting a couple of decent looks. He shot efficiently on those 9 shots, but if you're not going to shoot the ball more than that, the defense isn't really going to put that much pressure on you. And if the defense isn't going to put that much pressure on you, you're going to not be able to dominate in the playmaking department. And that's the real concern that's always existed with Tyrese, is that he has this tendency to just kind of not really give a shit about his own scoring because, you know, he's a pass-first player, playmaking is his instinct. But as I always tell you on this channel, they're intrinsically connected. And if he wants to be a dominant playmaker, he also needs to be a dominant scorer, and he just hasn't done that. On top of this stuff for the Knicks on the defensive end, what they've done against Tyrese Haliburton, what they've done against the Pacers. On offense, Deuce McBride more efficient. Alec Burks hit 5 3-pointers. Last game, the 20-point performance was more about the free throws. He hit 8 of them. This one, no free throws, 18 points, 5 3-pointers. Because of the offensive rebound difference, though, 101 shots for the Knicks, 72 for the Pacers. A 29 field goal attempt difference. It doesn't matter that the Knicks actually shot worse from 3. They didn't shoot much better from the field or the free throw line either, but they got more attempts. They got 8 more 3-point attempts, so they ended up making the same amount as the Pacers did. You know, if the discrepancy is going to be that dramatic, it's very, very hard to win that game, which is why the Knicks won this game rather convincingly. That said, this wasn't as convincing as the Game 4 win was for the Pacers. They actually got it down to single digits in the third quarter. There were stretches in the second quarter where it was single digits, but the Knicks would just blow it wide open, and they ended up winning the second half by 15 points. So definitely a little bit more letting them stay in it than the Pacers allowed in Game 4, but at the end of the day, they won this game very convincingly. So what does this mean for the series going forward? Game 6 being played in Indiana, Game 7 being played in New York. I think that the Pacers are probably going to win Game 6 and that this is going to be a 7-game series. This has been a hard series to predict. A lot of weird factors, injury factor, the Pacers and Knicks having just very contrasting play styles, but they have managed to meet in the middle into making an actually pretty damn great series, a very cutthroat series, and you wouldn't expect Indiana to necessarily match that super well. They have the offensive prominence, but they haven't been known as a physical or defensive team, but they've been pretty good at being a physical and defensive team once this postseason's come around, and I think they're overall a team that is outperforming their expectations as a playoff team pretty dramatically. I expected them to lose in the first round to the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously. Even without Giannis, I probably would have picked the Bucks to win that series. Dame also got hurt for stretches, so that didn't help them. But this might be a team that could theoretically make the conference finals, which I would say for what we expected going into this playoffs would be quite the shock. But you know, there's already been plenty of those, so why not add one more to it? But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Knicks-Pacers series. I'm probably going to cover Games 6 and 7 much more in depth than this. I've just been pretty busy. But yeah, that is it. Check this show out on Spotify if you want to. Check it out on other audio platforms soon when we have it there. But that is it. Goodbye.